Hi, I'm Joe Carraro. Well, it's us against them again. Is it just me, or do people not understand what has happened with this recent Supreme Court decision ruling for the elite again against us average citizens by allowing corporations to act as individuals in elections? Trust me, folks, it's not all black and white on either side. As a state senator elected to serve for 20 years, I can assure you that many of my battles for the people were against those who would infringe on their individuality by corrupting the political process with money. Having been in the political arena, I've seen how corporations and unions can dominate elections because of their capability to give unlimited funds to those candidates supporting their side of the issues rather than the public's interest. This Supreme Court decision gives me great concern because it expands this corruption to federal and states' political processes. We all know that if government gives everyone everything they want, that eventually no one will get anything and the government will absorb all we had before, leaving us all with less than we began with. Some think the objective is redistribution of wealth because that's the term that's used to get the have-nots on their side to take away from the haves. But the goal of redistribution is really to put the government in total control of everyone's lives by deciding who gets what, after it takes its increasing share that used to belong to the individuals who gave it the power to decide and control. It's not the redistribution of wealth of individuals, but rather the redistribution of power to the government. And now we have the Supreme Court ruling that major corporations and unions with both foreign and domestic stakeholders can once again be fully involved in out-influencing individuals with contributions to political campaigns. The Supreme Court has created a new definition of freedom of speech to essentially provide unfair competition for liberties that had been exclusively set aside for the protection of individuals and championed by constitutionalists and conservatives. But now, instead of Democrats feigning redistribution of wealth to give more power to the government, we have Republicans feigning freedoms for all to give more power to big business, although it's getting harder and harder to see the separation. These stakeholders in these mega corporations and unions would already have access to making political contributions as citizens of the United States. Their point of view of their interests and that they belong to and believe in are already represented by the freedoms granted to them as individuals. But somehow the promise of total freedom for these artificial entities called corporations has convinced some that they would be better off with the capability to have unbridled influence in our political system, granted to those with foreign interests and those whose primary motivation is to improve the welfare of corporate owners at the expense of the interests of our country, as it was just evidenced in our current financial crisis. And once again, it's not the equal distribution of freedom that is the goal, but the distribution of power away from the individual. We continue to lose control of our lives and our country to these political forces. There are some masquerading as liberals concerned with the plight of the downtrodden, and others camouflaged as conservatives concerned about the limitation of freedom of speech. And they're all hell-bent on taking away our individuality. Don't forget, this case involved activist judges who were appointed as conservatives who were supposed to be against judicial activism. This case changed from being a decision as to the time limits that big businesses such as corporations and unions had to air in directed commercials to begin questioning of whether corporations and unions have the same constitutional right to free speech as we the people, and will now open the floodgates for their participation to influence elections in our country. And just because Nancy Pelosi is against the court's decision doesn't make it a conservative ruling. Every once in a while she might be right. Of course, she has her own agenda with trying to pass a countering law through Congress. Those conservatives on the right who support the ruling have stolen the identity of our causes and ideologies to corrupt our political system so that it no longer involves the debates of our constitutional rights, but rather uses what we believe against us, and yet makes it seem like they are one of us while stealing our liberties and freedoms. We can't be fooled by labels anymore on either side. We have to think for ourselves and not be deceived by those who impersonate our values to control our future. Those that are for us will be recognized by their defense of our individual liberties. Stay alert, folks. I think the worst is yet to come. And thanks for listening to An Average Joe.